Welcome to today's Food Freedom Cook-Along. My name is Kalisa Marie Martin, or Kalisa Marie Eats on Instagram, and I'm so excited to be here today. I'm a classically trained chef and travel entrepreneur, currently working in the food media industry, developing recipes and creating food content. And what I love about food is that it really permeates all aspects of the human experience, from culture and nutrition to business and art, and literally everything in between. And as easy it might be to think about food as, fun recipes and dining at our favorite restaurants, it goes so much deeper than that, because food is inherently political. And every decision that we make about food is really influenced by our social structures and the iniquities that pervade them. I'm really excited about the panel that's coming after this, because they're going to be diving deeper into those topics. But in this cook-along, we're going to be touching on how the history of a lot of our food customs is often complicated and really rooted in inequality that's worth remembering, because, it's never just food. There's always a story behind it. And the dish that we're going to be making that I'm super excited about is Jamaican saltfish fritters. Now, I'm a first-generation American of Jamaican heritage, and I love saltfish fritters. They're great for breakfast, but really any time of day. And if you're not familiar with saltfish, it's actually cod that's been dried and preserved in salt. And growing up, it never occurred to me that this main ingredient was actually introduced to the island by its colonizers in the 18th century as a cheap protein to feed enslaved people. They needed something that would make the trip across the Atlantic Ocean without spoiling. And eventually, this ingredient became one of Jamaica's most celebrated foods, even being featured in the national dish, Ackee saltfish. Now, this history is important because a lot of times when people talk about a melting pot of cultures or even fusion cuisines, it's imagined that it's, this harmonious coming together. But a lot of times that integration is by force. And our ancestors, while they adapted these ingredients to create new dishes like saltfish fritters, it's not a celebration of that colonial influence. Instead, it's really a testament to our resilience, our creativity, and our self-reliance. And that makes me love saltfish fritters even more. Let's make these saltfish fritters. But first, let's get into the ingredients and what we need to make them. So we have our saltfish that's already been flaked and ready to go, and I'll tell you how it gets to that point. We have a cup of chopped onions and about a cup of chopped scallions, 6 cloves of garlic that we minced up finely, 5 plum tomatoes, Scotch bonnet pepper, about a half of a pepper, and if you don't like spice, you can take this out, or if you just want to make it a little bit less spicy, remove the seeds before you chop it up. Then we have 4 teaspoons of baking powder and about 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Of course, because we're making fritters, we need some flour. We have 3 cups of all-purpose flour. And then some coconut oil that we're going to be sauteing our vegetables in. Okay, so to rehydrate the saltfish, you can do it one of 2 ways. Either the overnight method or the same day method. If you're going to do overnight, you just rinse off the excess salt, put it in a pot, cover it with cold water, and bring it up to a boil. Then turn off the heat and let it sit on the counter overnight. And the next day, you're going to want to taste it. And taste it from like the meatiest part of it, not one of the skinnier ends. And it should be flavorful, but not overly salty. If it's still too salty, then get rid of that water, add fresh water, bring it up to a boil and drain it, and then you'll be in good shape. At that point, you can flake it up and it'll look like this. You want it to be in, nice bite-sized pieces. So that's a look at that. And if you're going to do the same day method, basically it's the same process. You're just bringing it up to a boil and draining it 3 times in a row. And then you're good to go. All right, so first step is we're gonna saute what we call our seasoning. So for now, let's get our flour out of the way and our baking soda and our salt. So we're working with just what we need at the moment. So let's saute our seasonings. First goes in our 1/4 cup of raw coconut oil. Now, if you don't happen to have coconut oil on hand, that's totally fine. Just whatever cooking oil you use. But the coconut oil will really add a fragrant aroma and flavor that is really nice. Next, let's add in our onions. And this is just like over medium. And then we have scallions. We're just adding everything right in. The tomatoes. Stack them up as we go. And the garlic. Thyme. And the Scotch bonnet pepper. We're using habanero because in the States, you know, you can't always find Scotch bonnet peppers, but habanero peppers are a good substitute. So now we just want to saute this until the onions are translucent. This will take a few minutes. Our seasonings have been simmering and sauteing for about 15 minutes, and the onions are nice and soft, and all the water that the tomatoes release has been mostly absorbed. So we are ready to add the saltfish to this. Let's show it on this one. So you can see this has been simmering for about 15 minutes, and the onions are nice and soft, and all the liquid that the tomatoes release has been mostly evaporated. Cool. All right, so let's add our saltfish to our pan. And we want to give this about a minute because we want all those flavors to come together. You can see there's a lot of saltfish here because we don't want it to be super doughy. This is like a saltfish fritter. You want to taste the fish. All right. So we're gonna set this aside to cool and then get our flour mixture ready while we heat up the oil for frying as well. Looks and smells so good. I hope yours is looking and smelling good right now too. Okay, let's also taste it because we want to see how much salt we're going to add to the flour mixture. This is already really good. Has a nice amount of salt to it, so I usually add between a teaspoon to 2 teaspoons. Ooh, it's a little bit spicy too. And so this, since this has a good amount of salt, I'm just gonna do a teaspoon in this case. But taste it yourself, add as much as you think makes sense for you. Okay, so our saltfish mixture is good to go. Let's just set it aside to cool slightly while we get the rest of our batter ingredients together. So we have our large bowl and the 3 cups of flour, the baking powder, and our salt. And while we get this going, let's grab our pot of oil so that can be preheating in the meantime. All right, so let's make our fritter batter mixture. So first goes in our flour, and I'm using gluten-free flour actually, so if you're gluten-free like me, just swap in your all-purpose gluten-free flour and that will work too. And then we have our salt and baking powder. And baking powder is important because of course we want these to get puffy and light, and that is what the baking powder is for. So let's whisk it all together, make sure that's fully combined. And our saltfish mixture had a few minutes to cool down, so let's go ahead and add that straight in here. Okie dokie, now we're gonna get this all combined before we add the water, because depending on how much moisture the tomatoes release, that will kind of decide how much water we'll add. It's usually between 2 and 3 cups. mixed. This is what it looks like before we've added our water. Once this is fully mixed together, we're gonna add our water. I've measured about 3 cups, but we may not need all of this. So just do 1 cup at a time, because once it's in, you can't take it out. So it's about cup, mix, mix, mix. And we really just want to add enough for the batter to come together. We don't want it too loose. All right. Make sure you're fully mixing it each time so we can see where we're at. Still a little dry, so I'm gonna add a little more. All right, we might be there. Let's see. All right, this looks really good. All right, see how it's still pretty thick? That's what we want. All right, so we are ready to fry and our batter's looking really good. We actually only used about 1.5 cups of water this time, and that's because of the type of flour that we're using and the amount of moisture that was in those tomatoes. So again, don't add all 3 cups at once, just do a little bit at a time to get this thick batter consistency and you'll be good to go. So to fry our fritters, I'm just using a deep heavy pot because I don't have a deep fryer, but if you do have one of those, set it to 350 degrees, or if you have a thermometer that you can stick in, that's the temperature that you're going for. But I know that I'm going to be at the right place even without a thermometer, because this has been preheating for about 10 minutes on medium high, and when I stick my wooden thermometer or my wooden spoon in, it bubbles around it pretty vigorously, and that's how I know that we're ready to go. All right, so let's use 2 spoons just to make it easy to get the batter in there, and just carefully drop them in. You don't want to overcrowd your pan because that will make the temperature of your oil drop too suddenly. So space them out as you get them in there, and they'll eventually float up to the top. They take about 5 to 6 minutes, so set a timer so that you don't over or underdo it. We want them to be nice and golden brown on the outside, but fully cooked on the inside. All right, and everybody has, a different way of making saltfish fritters. Some people pan fry them and they're more flat. This is the way that my mom makes them and the way she taught me, and so this is how I love them. They end up being like these round little puffs that are so good. I'll show you what they look like. All right, so this is what they look like bubbling away. They're floating to the top. You don't have to flip them or anything because they will cook all the way through in about 5 minutes. Okay, these have been frying for 5 minutes. We set our timer and they look perfectly golden brown. Can you see that? So just scoop them right out. If you don't have one of these, just like a slotted spoon so that you don't carry the grease with you. That's the whole idea. All right, so we're gonna keep going, get some more batches in, and fry up all this batter. Okay, so we fried up the rest of our batter, and this is the last batch, and they're ready to come out. They all look so cute. They're all different shapes and sizes. Well, not different sizes because we want them approximately the same size, but they all have their own little personalities to them. Oops, overboard. But take a look at this. I cannot wait to eat them. All right, so we fried up all the batter, and as you can see, it makes a lot of fritters, about 30 of them. So definitely worth sharing, but I'm gonna try one right now. Take a look at that. These are so good. It's light and crispy on the outside, nice and tender on the inside. You can see the chunks of saltfish and taste all the seasonings that we cook together. It's no wonder that these are thought to be one of the first fast foods in Jamaica. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you had a great time making these saltfish fritters. Stay tuned because the panel up next is going to dive deeper into the intersection of food and inequality. Cheers!